Hello, guys. Welcome back to Faith Movies. Today's movie recap will be a drama and melodrama movie from 2016 called God's Not Dead. Warning, there are spoilers ahead. This film is a sequel, taking place a few months after the first film. At the beginning of the movie, we're introduced to new characters and revisit characters from the first film. The movie follows the story of Grace Wesley, a devout evangelical Christian and an AP history teacher who is facing a court case that could end her career after she answers a student's question about Jesus. A teenager named Brooke is trying to go about her day but is depressed because her brother died in an accident 6 months ago. Her parents seem to be over it and want her to be too. It was the only way to move on in life, letting the dead go. It was, however, a difficult time for her. Grace Wesley is Brooke's history teacher. She is very upbeat and was even voted Teacher of the Year. She lives with her elderly father, whom she takes care of. Reverend David returns and is having a bad day when Reverend Jude, also from the first film, shows up. He will be finishing his doctorate in the States and will be staying there. Amy returns as a journalist. She was diagnosed with cancer at the end of the last film and became a Christian while interviewing the newsboys. She just came from the doctor and is now friends with the band and tells them she is cancer-free. Now that her illness is in remission, she wants to seek God out while just living her normal life. It was a miracle because at the time she found out about her illness, she also had a bad breakup with her boyfriend due to the illness. Her purpose was no longer visible in his life, so he had to let her go. Martin Yip also returns as a Chinese college student. Despite his father always telling him to follow whatever was popular on campus, he was fascinated by the life of a fellow classmate who was a student and became a Christian at the end of the first film and is now seeking answers to many of his questions. At the end of class, Grace notices Brooke seems upset and asks her. Brooke tells her she is fine, but later seeks her out to talk. They talk about her loss and she asks Grace how she stays so upbeat all the time. Grace's answer is Jesus. Later, the Salvation Army comes to pick up her brother's things and a volunteer gives Brooke a Bible she found. Her family is atheist, which is why she is confused as to why her brother would have one. It's all marked up with notes and she begins reading it. It did not add up. In another scene, while in class, Grace is talking about Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr.'s teachings about peaceful solutions. Brooke raises her hand and asks if it is also similar to Jesus' teachings. Grace agrees and recites some of Jesus' words from the Bible to show the similarities. One student takes out his cell phone and tells someone that Grace has been preaching in class. She is called in for a disciplinary action and put on paid administrative leave while they investigate. She gets a lawyer from the teachers' union, a very young lawyer named Tom Endler. He is not a Christian but feels as though that will help their case. At the next meeting, they offer her a plea just to apologize to the board for her wrongdoing and it will all be over. She refuses, as she doesn't feel as though she did anything wrong. She was just quoting someone, not preaching. The case now goes to court. She had no idea why they were making a mountain out of a small matter. Meanwhile, Brooke, a student who was inspired by Grace's teaching, becomes a key witness in the trial. The prosecutor, Peter Kane, goes to Brooke's house to convince her parents to get in on this. It will help her get into college. They want to make this very public so Grace will be an example for others. They agree despite Brooke not wanting anything to do with it. Despite being tricked by the prosecution into admitting that Grace initiated their first conversation about Jesus, Brooke's testimony would ultimately help to sway the jury in Grace's favor. Reverend Dave is called for jury duty and he is selected to be on the jury for this case. Brooke and her friends begin protesting as the case goes on. Her best friend Marlene is Amy's niece. She calls Amy to try to get her to report on the story. As the trial progresses, Grace's defense team, led by Tom Endler, calls several expert witnesses to testify in her behalf. Christian apologists J. Warner Wallace and Lee Strobel are called to defend the idea that Jesus was a literal historical figure and thus an appropriate subject of classroom debate. Their testimonies provide a thought-provoking exploration of the historical evidence for Jesus' existence and the implications of this for modern society. As the case goes on, Brooke goes to church and sees Martin. He, as a new Christian, has many questions, but she has more and begins to ask him. She became a Christian in the church that night. Martin, however, is disowned by his father for his faith. He later decides to return to China to become a pastor. Meanwhile, Reverend Dave and other pastors receive a subpoena to submit their sermons from the last 3 months for review. He refuses. Many witnesses are called to testify. Grace's principal expresses how Grace had invited her to church one time to support their students, and her colleague says how she talks about God all the time on school property. Grace and Tom need a new strategy, so they decide to make the case that Jesus was a real historical figure, just like Gandhi and MLK. They call on historians as witnesses and make their case. Suddenly, Reverend Dave becomes sick and they must replace him with an alternate. He has appendicitis. They replace him with a young woman who dresses differently, colored hair, makeup, piercings, and tattoos. Despite this, it looks positive until Brooke barges into the courtroom. She wants to testify to help her teacher. They agree, thinking she will only help. However, the conversation they had about her brother comes up. Kane makes the case that if they never had this conversation where Jesus was mentioned, she never would have asked the question in class or become a Christian. It seems as though all hope is lost, and Tom tells Grace to prepare to lose. To show their solidarity, Brooke and all her friends show up at Grace's door that night, singing How Great Thou Art by candlelight. The next day, Tom is nowhere to be found. Suddenly, he barges into the courtroom and calls Grace to the stand without her knowing. He began by questioning her about her faith, causing her to cry and ask, "Why are you doing this?" It was usually the approach they used to throw the believers off their stand. Grace wondered why he was acting that way, and she had no say in the matter. He goes on to ask the jury to just convict her already. He is found in contempt as he goes on and on, yelling, saying that, "This is the first step, let's just silence all the Christians, and if this doesn't work, fine them, jail them, etc." He tells Grace later that he had to do it that way without her knowing, so that the jury would see her true reaction. At the Newsboys concert, they phoned Amy to pray for the outcome. Amazingly enough, Grace is cleared of all charges. The replacement juror is a Christian, showing not to judge a book by its cover. They all go outside, and a huge crowd is there singing and celebrating with Grace that God is not dead. After the closing credits, Reverend Dave is arrested by the local police for not giving copies of his sermons for the last 3 months in response to the subpoena. He goes into the police car peacefully and doesn't resist arrest. The prosecution, led by Peter Kane, is determined to prove that Grace's actions were unconstitutional and that she has no right to express her faith in the classroom. Kane's opening statement sets the tone for the rest of the trial as he declares that the lawsuit will prove once and for all that God is dead. This statement highlights the themes of the movie, which explores the tension between faith and secularism in the modern society. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to give a thumbs up and subscribe. Your support is appreciated. Remember, Jesus loves you. Have a blessed day, and see you next time.